Hey there, guys. All right, and welcome to another week of World War II. We're on to number 71, January 4th, 1941. It's 1941. A world at war. Let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right in.
But you have to come. It's a family reunion. Okay, that's your excuse. Who cares how many generations? Yeah. January 4th, 1941. Over the past 16 months, what was a localized European conflict has spiraled and morphed into a second world war. And it seems that every month it grows larger, engulfing nation after nation. It still has not seen offensives, in Europe at least, with the scale of destruction seen in the First World War. But now it's 1941.
Dun, 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 dun.
I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Greek advance against the Italians continued, though they paused late in the week to consolidate, now controlling about a quarter of Albania. There was also a fair amount of action in the skies, even at Christmas time. That action continues this week. On the 29th, an air raid damages St. Paul's Cathedral in London. And Luftwaffe bombers also damaged the Old Bailey and the Guildhall in London this week, along with 8 Christopher Wren churches. All these raids bring the December total of British civilian deaths to 3,793. On January 2nd, 2 German bombers, maybe flying off course, bombed the Irish Free State.
Now, what did Dublin do to you?
I say maybe because this is the second night in a row that this happens. The next day, the RAF attacks Kiel and Bremen. Kiel Canal Bridge takes a direct hit and collapses onto the Finnish ship Yrsa. The British are advancing in the field this week, though, in North Africa. On New Year's Day, British and Commonwealth troops begin their advance towards Italian-held Bardia. From the 2nd to the 4th, Bardia is bombarded by sea and bombed by air. One of the ships firing is the battleship Valiant, with 19-year-old Prince Philip of Greece aboard. Now, he is the only son of Prince Andrew of Greece. But after the Greco-Turkish War, Andrew was banned from Greece. Philip has, though, recently spent time in Greece, although he grew up in France, Britain, and Germany, and he joined the Royal Navy in 1939. Also in 1939, he began corresponding with the young English Princess Elizabeth. Big break from the timeline here. 11 years from now, his by-then wife, Elizabeth, will become the Queen of the United Kingdom. Since he is still alive at the age of 98 at the time of writing this, don't expect him to be killed in the war. Anyhow, Richard O'Connor, the field...
Well, he's dead now, so does he die in the war?
Commander for Operation Compass, which began last month and which this Bardia drive is part of, really pushes his men, and they outrun their supply lines. But he has loads of captured supplies, especially food and gasoline, from a few weeks ago to try and make up for what they outrun. Supply issues are huge for fighting in that region, mainly just moving stuff from point A to point B, but I'll talk more about that in the future. Now, Rodolfo Graziani, in overall command of the Italian forces, and nobody's fool, understands why the British paused their advance, and he has asked Benito Mussolini for permission to retreat to Tobruk to await reinforcements from Italy and concentrate his forces. But Mussolini wants the British advance delayed, so 4 divisions of Graziani's army are at Bardia under Electric Whiskers himself, Annibale Bergonzoni.
Electric Whiskers? What? Is that his... Don't tell me that's the actual nickname.
British armor has cut the road behind them, so they can't be easily reinforced. But the Italians still have a strong position. Fields of landmines, barbed wire all over the place, tank trap ditches, stuff like that. O'Connor's force becomes the 13th Corps January 1st and is the 7th Armored Division and most of the 6th Australian Division. They also have the 16th Infantry Brigade, detached last month from the 4th Indian Division, 23 working tanks from the 7th Royal Tank Regiment, 2 artillery regiments, and the 1st Battalion of the Northumberland Fusiliers. The Australian Division, though still not yet complete, will be making their first assault of the war. It's the first attack of the war under Australian command. They are under Ivan Mackay. Complete side note here once again. Mackay's family is from Sutherland, Scotland going back, the seat of Clan Mackay. My mother's family on her father's side is Clan Mackay going back. That is the Ray family. My mother's maiden name was Ray. And Lord Ray of Mackay sits in the House of Lords. So at some distance, I suppose I'm related to Ivan Mackay. Well, he plans to attack from the west, hoping to achieve
Genealogy hurts my brain.
surprise at a point between two defensive sectors. So if he can break in, he'll split the defense and isolate the enemy artillery. Infantry will go in first and clear the anti-tank works, and then the armor will advance. The attack is supposed to go off January 2nd, but they postpone it a day to build up supplies. At dawn on the 3rd, the Australian 16th Brigade advances in the west. They are to sweep south to where the 17th Australian Brigade will try to break in and attack the Italian artillery. The 16th makes good time taking its objectives, though the tanks take a beating. The 17th, advancing at 11:30, has more trouble. The whole time, 3 battleships are sending 15-inch shells into the Italians from off the coast, and the RAF has total air superiority. So the Italians are really in a tough position. The last resistance is overcome on the 5th, so tomorrow, at 1 p.m. For the loss of 645 men, some 40,000 prisoners are taken, though different sources have different numbers, from as low as 35,000 to as high as 45,000. Also taken are 462 big guns, 127 tanks and tankettes, and
I don't know if you want the Italian tanks. May not be that good.
over 700 trucks. Importantly, they managed to take the water supply plant and the harbor undamaged. They do not, however, capture Electric Whiskers, who manages to escape.
Okay, now I'm starting to think that it is actually his nickname. All right.
In just a few
Electric
weeks on
Whiskers,
this
okay.
front, though, the offensive has destroyed 8 Italian divisions. Tobruk lies 70 kilometers away. That is not, however, the only renewed advance this week. On January 4th, the Greek army renews its advance into Albania, with 13 divisions against 16 Italian ones, aiming for Klissura and the Klissura Pass. Now, this week on December 30th, British intelligence, from decrypted German Air Force Enigma messages, has calculated the size of the German buildup of forces in Romania, which they think is for a German attack on Greece. They believe this will happen in early March. But one fight that might happen a lot sooner than that could be brewing over in China. I talked a couple of times last month about Chinese nationalist army leader Chiang Kai-shek ordering the communist New Fourth Army to move north of the Yangtze River. Well, some of the Fourth Army units followed those orders and headed north. But on January 4th, as this week ends, New Fourth Army forces begin moving south, not north. Their leadership claims that this is necessary because otherwise they'll be marching through territory held by the Japanese. Chiang thinks it's a move to expand the communist area of control. The situation is very volatile. As it's the end of one year and the beginning of another, although I guess not technically in China. Well, anyhow, I'd like to look at the general situation there. We've seen a struggle of ideas on multiple fronts turn more and more often into a struggle in the field between groups that should be making common cause against an external invader. External observers have their opinions as well. American Ambassador Nelson Johnson will soon send his assessment of the situation to Washington. This in response to an assessment sent by Major Evans Carlson, who has done an extensive tour of China. I read their views in Rana Mitter's Forgotten Ally, and they do very much illustrate a split in how Americans see 1940 Chinese politics. Carlson sympathizes with the Chinese communists after spending a lot of time among them. He thinks Chiang and the nationalists are heading towards fascism, and that if the U.S. funds them, they should demand Chiang put in place more democratic structures. Johnson disagrees very much with this opinion. Sure, he says, the nationalists want to keep power. That's normal. But since the war began, they've created the National Political Consultative Council, on which the communists are representative. The communists still publish their own newspaper in Chongqing, which would not have been even possible before the war, and certainly not allowed if Chiang was a fascist. The nationalists did not use the war as an excuse to eliminate political opposition. Johnson sees Chiang as the symbol of united resistance to the Japanese, and he does not agree that American funding to China be conditional on big nationalist political reform. Chiang was determined to fight the Japanese, and the US should support him in that endeavor. And the different sides all laid different claims to Sun Yat-sen's guiding basic philosophy, the three principles. But Mitter points out that those three, nationalism, democracy, and livelihood for the people, were only semi-practiced during the 10 years of nationalist rule before the war. Now it seems that Chiang has some intention of implementing them. But Mao Zedong argues that Chiang's embrace of the principles is just to preserve the economic status quo and sabotage the communists. He proposes a new Three People's Principles for Chiang for a much more openly communist program. An alliance with the USSR should be higher priority than with imperialist powers. There should be cooperation with the Communist Party.
Now, Mao. The Soviet Union is also an imperialist power. Are we ignoring what they tried to do to Finland? What happened in the Baltic states? Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, you know? Just saying.
And assistance to the working class and the peasants. Now, these are, of course, proposed in opposition to Chiang and the nationalists, but Mao is clear that he sees them as a development of Sun Yat-sen's three. But Wang Jingwei's puppet regime in Nanking also uses Sun's ideas, but for yet another policy system. For Wang, it was Sun's attachment to Pan-Asianism that was most critical, since it provided the basis for an argument that collaboration with Japan was in fact a version of the nationalist project that Sun pursued. However, none of these three was interested in setting up what the West would regard as a democracy, a multi-party system with a bunch of civil liberties. Mao and Chiang talk of democracy, but what they mean is more like mass political participation under the guidance and leadership of a single dominant political party or force. But as for the leader of the largest of those Western democracies, on December 29th, President Franklin Roosevelt says to the American people, "The people of Europe who are defending themselves do not ask us to do their fighting. They ask us for the implements of war, the planes, the tanks, the guns, the freighters, which will enable them to fight for their liberty and for our security. We must be the great arsenal of democracy." The U.S. is also supplying China. Well, that is the week. Renewed action in Greece and North Africa, bombers over Britain, Ireland, and Germany, and tension in the Far East. Rana Mitter wrote this: "The disastrous year 1940 seemed to cast doubt on the idea that there might be any future for China outside the Japanese Empire." But it isn't just China. At this point, the future of many nations is doubtful. Those under occupation, of course, but even others like Britain. And I don't mean just mere independence. Edward Murrow summed it up pretty well last September. "This war has no relation with the last one so far as symbols and civilians are concerned. You must understand that a world is dying, that old values, the old prejudices, and the old bases of power and prestige are going. And while much of Britain's ruling elite see the war as being fought to sustain their old society, they may very well be deluding themselves. I guess we'll maybe see in 1941 if they are or not. Happy New Year."
Yay. And that was week 71 of World War II. It's 1941. World at War. January 4th, 1941. This was a week where there definitely could be some discussion in regards to the things happening in China, I think most particularly. However, I do not know enough about Chiang Kai-shek or Mao Zedong to really expand on anything. So I shall leave that up to y'all in the comments to inform me and others of anything that maybe could be expanded upon or opinions had. But with that said, if you guys enjoyed, remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.